All right, I think, okay, yeah, we are now live. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Abandoned Mine Reclamation Chronicles, episode 2. And I am one of your hosts, Bobby Hughes, the executive director for the Eastern Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation. That's EPCAMR for short. And this podcast is a one of a kind podcast that converses with passionate, community minded partners, highlights outstanding reclamation and community projects and cleanups, showcases stream improvement projects and successes, and shares emerging ideas and technologies to reclaim and remediate our legacy abandoned mine sites. And we're trying to share those types of technologies that will allow us to clean up our pre 1977 abandoned mines lands and streams and rivers polluted by abandoned mine drainage. I'm also here today with Andy McAllister, the regional coordinator from the Western Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation, and Ann Dammit, she's in the background here from Webcamera as well, and our guest today, Jim Panaro with Robindale Energy Services. And I'll toss it off to Andy here.
Thanks, Bobby. We're very excited to continue this project. This project came about as a result of the first joint visioning session that Whipcammer and Epcammer had in 25 years. And we just want to thank all the attendees who've joined us today. We want to thank Jim Panaro and Robindale Energy. And we want to thank the Foundation for Pennsylvania Watersheds, who has underwritten the first 12 episodes of this podcast. And we're hopeful that the live streaming personal interviews and discussing timely topics related to abandoned mine reclamation will engage with our audiences on a new level. And feel free to put your questions and comments into what comments box of where you're joining us from. And that will help us see what your comments are. Bobby?
Sure. So let me first introduce our guest here, Jim Panaro, and kind of give you a little background on his work that he's done in this particular field. Jim's been with this type of work for over 35 years and has experience in the waste coal reclamation and generation business, and has been with Robindale Energy Services since 2001. And he currently serves as the executive vice president. Prior to that time, he was at the Cambria Cogen company for 11 years. And Jim started at Cambria during the plant construction and commissioning that was primarily involved in environmental monitoring, the reporting and the compliance issues, but also advanced through the plant ranks to the level of operations superintendent before coming to Robindale. And Jim's role at Robindale is really focused on new project development, contract administration, and the day-to-day oversight of Robindale's traditional waste coal business supply side, with over 6 million tons of annual material movement. And he acts as a liaison between the local conservation district groups and the DEP and Department of Environmental Protection to partner with Robindale on various mine reclamation projects, including 2 of them that won an Office of Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement National Reclamation Award back in 2010 and 2021, as well as receiving the Governor's Environmental Excellence Awards in 1996, 2011, 2014, and 2022. And since 2001, Jim has been directly involved with the reclamation projects in an 8-county area in southwestern Pennsylvania in the bituminous coal region that's removed over 70 million tons of bituminous waste coal from many different watersheds and has restored over 2,000 acres of abandoned mine lands to productive use. So Jim's done quite a bit of work in Western Pennsylvania. It's helped us advance our cause and efforts that we strongly advocate for in abandoned mine reclamation and watershed restoration.
Thank you, Bobby. Welcome, Jim Panaro. Thank you so much for being a guest on Abandoned Mine Reclamation Chronicles.
It's great to see you again, Andy. It's been a little while.
It's good to see you. I think we see each other periodically in the course of our line of work, and it's good to have you in this kind of format. I think it would be great for our audience to get to know you better. If there's a way you can talk about you, your history, where did you grow up? What is your story?
Well, my story is a local story. I grew up in a little town called St. Benedict. It was a small coal mining town in Cambria County. Except for a brief time away at college, I've been kind of blessed to be back in my home area for the majority of my career. I currently live in Ebensburg, or outside of Ebensburg in Cambria County. I've been married actually to my high school sweetheart for 37 years now. Have one son, Julian, and a daughter, Zoe. And again, blessed, they both live locally here to us now, and both starting families of their own. So it's been great to be with a local company and have these opportunities to raise my family here.
I have a question for you. Did you always have a connection to mining, like in your family background, and abandoned mine reclamation, or is that something new for you?
Well, no, I actually have a very long connection to the mining. And it was something that I found out actually more recently, doing some family research. I found that my grandfather on my dad's side emigrated from Italy in 1905 at 17 years old. And we saw his Ellis Island records, and it said that he was going to Elmora, Pennsylvania, to work in a coal mine, and was referred by a cousin. And so, he came into the area, over a century ago. And then my father worked in underground coal mines for 32 years after serving in World War II. So it's hard to imagine now for me that I've spent over half my life directly involved with this coal refuse reclamation projects, potentially on some of the coal that the two of them have mined over the period of time. So, and in fact, one of the OSM awards that Bobby mentioned earlier was for a Barnes Watkins pile that we did in 2006 to 2008. That pile was a national OSM award for best Eastern reclamation project. It was about a mile away from where I went to elementary school. And ironically, finding out within the last 2 years, that's the same town that my grandfather came to from Italy. So I would say that is a long history in the coal side.
I would think so too. And now that you've definitely been involved in mining and reclamation in your career, I think Bobby has a few questions about that. Go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, Jim, I was wondering if maybe you could share a little bit of more details about your career, like, just where did you start even before maybe coming into this particular field? And can you give us a little bit more information about Robindale Energy and the work that they're doing? And if you get a chance, maybe talk about the history of the cogens and just sort of how they came about and when, and maybe a little background on power purchase agreements, and we'll talk a little bit later, but maybe just a differentiation between what a cogen plant is versus what a coal-fired plant is, because there's a lot of differences there that I think there's a misconception out there, and there's a lot of misinformation about the difference between the two types of plants in both the active industry and in reclamation work that we see you all doing and have done both across the bituminous region and here in the anthracite.
Okay. It's a lot of questions. You'll have to remind me if I missed a few.
Yeah, I'll come back to them. Yeah.
I actually started my career. I went to Penn State. I'm a mechanical engineer. After graduating from Penn State, like literally within a couple weeks, I went to work for a defense subcontractor in our area. It was a machine shop and a sheet metal shop that made parts for Grumman aircraft. So back at that time, there was a lot of our Congressman John Murtha was very involved in. There were a lot of defense subcontractor projects in the Johnstown area in the late 80s, early 90s. primarily where a lot of the people were going to work as our coal mine industry was closing down. It was a step back, trying to revert the economy onto to that side. But also about that time was when these cogen plants started to come around. So I only worked for about 2 years for that defense subcontractor, and then we got word that Cambria Cogen was going to start up. So I had applied there. A lot of my mechanical engineering background in thermodynamics and the power plant side, that was an interest to me. So I went to Cambria Cogen in 1990. That plant was still under construction. It was a brand new plant. It was actually being built by Air Products and Chemicals from Allentown, PA. That was the first bituminous waste or gob-fired plant that was built in Pennsylvania. It came online in March of 1991 and went commercial. I was there for about 11 years and then went to Robindale. When Robindale was being formed, I was actually the first person hired for their new company. And at that time, Robindale initially was a 50-50 partnership. It was founded by Scott Crow from Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and also Neil Hedrick from Blossburg, PA, north of Williamsport. They were completely formed a company just for the sole purpose of supplying fuel and limestone and handling the ash from the Seward plant that was under construction at that time. Seward started construction in 2000 and it went through 2004 and it came online. Seward is the largest waste coal fired plant in the US and maybe one in the world. We're not sure what goes on in China sometimes, but they had a long-term supply agreement to ship fuel and limestone. And we also had a long-term agreement to handle all the maintenance and operating at the plant, inside the plant on the material handling section. So all the fuel receiving, crushing, the limestone receiving and pulverizing, and then as well as loading the outbound trucks. So, that was kind of the core part of our business. And then in 2015, NRG had owned the Seward plant. They had approached us in 2015 and were thinking of selling the plant to a third party, another bigger electric company. At that time, we have a lot of the mine sites permitted. We were 100% sole source, exclusive supplier. We had some concerns that, frankly, that if somebody else bought it and it could potentially shut down, and we're partway through these reclamations, or convert it to gas or something, because the economic downturn after 2008 and the power prices were dropping. So NRG didn't see it as a key part of their business. So at that time, we actually threw our hat in the ring and we said we wanted to purchase a plant. And we ended up buying Seward in February of 2016. And we had NRG, we kind of flipped the script to NRG to be on, we kept them on site as operating the power block of the plant, the generation side. And that lasted until 2023. And at that point, we took over complete operation of the plant. We hired most of their operators and people on site and had to bring in some new people. And we've operated that since 2023 on our own, 100% from top to bottom. Also, beyond Seward, in 2017, Evansburg Power, which is a smaller 50 megawatt plant in Cambria County, it was owned by Babcock and Wilcox from Ohio. They had a power purchase agreement, which I'll kind of get back to, that was expired, and they were operating as a merchant plant, and they were going to plan to shut that plant down and decommission it. We purchased that plant in 2017 and have been operating it ever since. And then likewise, the Culver Green Energy plant, also in Cambria County, was owned by Northern Star Generation. Their power purchase agreement, they had a 25-year agreement. It ended in 2020. And on midnight of the day that PPA ended, they closed the plant and laid off their folks. We bought that plant in August of 2020, restarted in October of 2020, and have been running at that plant since. So with those 3 plants purchased in this area, it gave us some synergies to use different fuel sites, try to target certain qualities for the different plants. We handle all aspects now. We're completely vertically integrated. We do the site acquisition, permitting, the mining at the site, the reclamation work, the trucking. So we're fully integrated now through the whole process, top to bottom, which gives us an advantage because, when you had kind of traditional coal plants that are supplied by different suppliers, and they have a limestone supplier and a fuel supplier, all those people are trying to, make money on those different pieces. We're fully integrated. As long as the power plants make money, the pie got a lot smaller with the power prices going down. So there's not as many pieces of the pie to feed, and it gave us an economic advantage where we can run these 3 plants where the previous operators or owners couldn't. Mm-hmm. So let's see.
It was about the differences between the cogens and a coal-fired plant, maybe, would be helpful.
Okay. I guess that one thing too, I know with the total employment, we haven't talked about the employment side. With those, sure. With all 3 plants, the mine operations, the trucking operations, our company now has about 450 direct employees supporting those 3 plants. And it makes us one of the larger employers in the area now. With all 3 plants running at full capacity, we're consuming about more than 14,000 tons per day of waste fuel, which counts back to why we've been able to do over 70 million tons, with 6 million tons a year. So you talk about the difference in the technologies. The cogens, as people call them, came about it was an advent of a CFB technology, and CFB stands for circulating fluidized bed, and that's a technology that was developed in Europe in the 1970s, early 1980s, and it was built to burn low quality fuels such as lignite or peat moss or biomass. And then that technology started to grow in the States in the 1980s, actually in your area, Bobby, with some of the anthracite plants that came on. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of spread westward into Cambria and Emmitsburg, Culver, and finally scrubgrass up in Clarion County, I think, Piney Creek. There were a number of western bituminous plants. Since then, 3 of those have closed due to economic reasons, but that also came about. The technology was also kind of a perfect timing with what was the Congress enacted. It was called the Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act in 1978, or PURPA. And the purpose of that was that it required the electric industries to buy alternative energy. And it was generated by a qualified facility. And that they were required to buy that energy from those plants at an avoided cost rate. And that avoided cost proved pretty instrumental in the developers investing in these new and risky businesses because they had long-term, they were typically 20 or 25-year power purchase agreements that made these facilities financeable. So that whole process was kind of a merge of a regulatory issue that supported the financing plus this technology. The early PURPA plants, when they had these power purchase agreements, there had to be, the plants were operating and generating electricity, but they were also generating steam. So generating 2 products is where the cogeneration term came from, and why all these plants were initially labeled as cogen. So you had a steam host and, a small portion of the steam that was generated by burning the waste fuel went to those steam hosts, and then the balance was used to produce electricity that was sold into the grid. Later plants that came online, like Culver and Seward, after kind of the regulations changed, they did not have to have a steam host, so they're identified as independent power producers, and bid into the market. As far as the difference between the plants, there's three main differences that on the CFBs that allow them to work efficiently and cleanly with these low quality fuels. First off is the fuel size. When we bring material from these refuse sites, it's literally, could be the kitchen sink. A lot of these have been dump sites in the local areas for years. So, we'll bring in and we separate out the really large stuff, refrigerators, tires, that kind of thing. And we'll do a gradual step down to where we get everything down to 2 inches or smaller. And then that 2-inch material is crushed down to like a 3/8 inch by 0. You would identify that like a pea gravel or anti-skid size is the biggest. Whereas pulverized coal units, or traditional coal plant, pulverizes their coal down to it's like a gunpowder size. And when they burn that, it's a very hot flame. It's over 2,000 degrees, and it's almost like a torch, like a blowtorch. Whereas a CFB, it's more like a hot air popcorn popper. There's thousands and thousands of air nozzles in the bottom of a boiler that keep this material suspended, and it kind of bubbles around in there like lava, and these slow smoldering fire will burn those bigger particles down, and it only burns in about 1,500 to 1,800 degrees. And that's a key point for us, because the high ash content of these waste coals, if you exceed 2,000 degrees or 2,200 degrees, the ash will start to melt and stick together, and it makes a big clinker. So that's the key piece of this temperature thing, that why we can burn waste coal and a traditional plant can't. The other thing there is, at that temperature range, at 1,500 or 1,800 degrees, we add about 20 to 25% crushed limestone right into the boiler when we burn the fuel. And at that temperature range, it's like a limestone kiln. That limestone will break down and form calcium oxide. And then the calcium oxide that we feed, when we're burning this fuel, it's releasing sulfur in the form of SO2. And the calcium oxide and the SO2 combine to make gypsum, which is the same thing that wallboard's made out of. And it's an inert form of the sulfur. If that's put into the atmosphere, into the water, it will not leach the sulfur back out. The sulfur's captured. And we're required to do that to meet our air permits on our Title V air permits, to have 95% air SO2 capture. So they all kind of go together. Let's see, what's the it's free lime we talked about. I think that's it.
No, it's a pretty good differentiation between the two types of plants, and I'm sure more information can be found on either your website or the ARIPA website. And I know I always bite my tongue because I have a habit of saying the Anthracite Region Independent Power Producers Association, and Christy Sweeney always reminds me that it's now Appalachian,
Yeah.
So so it's good. That's good information to have. So anyway, with that, I'll turn it back to Andy, see if he's got some other questions here as well.
And Jim, with regard to, you mentioned independent power producers, we are familiar with something called ARIPA, the Appalachian Region Independent Power Producers Association. Can you tell us about ARIPA? It's what its activities are, how many plants are members, things like that?
Sure. ARIPA is a trade group, and you said it's made up of the CFB waste coal plants, as the voting members of the organization. And then there's industrial clients that serve them, whether it's boiler makers, pipe fitters, a lot of the mechanical maintenance, and the companies that support these plants, and those companies would be associate members. There's 12 plants currently. There's 10 in Pennsylvania, one's in West Virginia, and one's in Virginia. There used to be several more. Unfortunately, we've lost a lot of the plants, as I mentioned, over the years here in the western part of the state. Piney Creek and Cambria both shut down, and the scrubgrass plant is kind of running intermittently. So that, and I think there's been a few in the anthracite region as well. That accomplishments of ERIPA, I think last report from Christy Sweetie, I think we were 256 million tons of coal refuse cleaned up. And that would be, I'm not exactly certain when the first anthracite plant came on, probably 1985, 1986. But it's a tremendous amount taken out from all over the state. And it was, her last count was 7,200 acres of abandoned mine land reclaimed. You know, and what's hard to know is that 256 million tons is the AMD that was produced. A lot of those pre-act piles, pre-77, that were just leaching untreated into the waterways. It's impacted hundreds of miles of streams that has been cleaned up. That's probably the biggest advantage of the ERIPA plants statewide.
And as Jim, you mentioned before about jobs, I think the community impact is twofold or threefold: energy production, job production, or having jobs in these areas, and also the environmental impact that you guys can have. So
Yeah.
you're really creating a big community impact in the areas that you are.
Yeah, in the majority of those reclamation projects were done in, you know, keystone opportunity zones or economically challenged and pretty, you know, frankly, blighted communities. You know, they were once considered company towns, you know, in the early 1900s. And, you know, especially being from the area, again, to see, you know, these local community towns, you know, the unemployment was very high. Coal mine shut down, people left to go to other industries, you know, and now to see these piles cleaned up in the towns, the water's been cleaned up, there's more recreational opportunity, property values have come up. So we really think, you know, a hot buzzword and now is about the environmental justice. You know, what projects we're doing are environmental justice projects that are taking 100 years to clean up, you know, from these legacy coal operations. And it's really fulfilling to see that.
It is an incredible community impact. Bobby?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of the community impacts, and Andy will maybe ask this a little bit later on about some of the support that both the RIPA Trade Association itself and the plants have been supporting us in many ways through community involvement. Andy will touch on that, but I wanted to kind of just ask you if you had a sort of personal philosophy, or, you know, as a professional and a community leader, you know, what's been driving you to do the work, and you know, knowing how you built your career around this. Is there anything that you might want to say to others who could be interested in getting into this field? Maybe young professionals that have an interest in doing environmental restoration, or even mechanical engineering, or the type of jobs that typically could be at a plant. What would you say to those that are interested in potentially getting involved in this work?
I'd touch on, you know, for me personally, you know, I'm pretty dedicated, some would say crazy, a hunter and a fisherman. You know, I spend a lot of time in the field, you know, so again, to have a career in this field, to see this firsthand, and then, you know, doing the majority of the work within 30 miles of where I grew up is kind of just icing on the cake. You know, in my childhood, these streams were just orange, polluted. You know, if you wanted to have any kind of meaningful trout fishing, you had to go to Central PA, you know, this State College limestone streams. and that's really changed. I keep a mountain bike now in the back of my pickup truck, and before or after work, I can ride a section of the Ghost Town Trail, which is converted rail trail. Ditch my bike in the woods, and I can fly fish on South Branch of Blacklit Creek, which 20 years ago supported no aquatic life. And, we're catching wild brown trout now on that stream. So, that's astounding to me, that how quickly it's recovered, how quickly Mother Nature healed. And that turnaround has been simply amazing. And besides the air and water cleanup that we've talked about, it's seeing that rebound in and around some of the small towns with, property values and aesthetics, and just a little bit more community pride maybe has been really what's driven me.
Mm-hmm. No, I think a lot of people feel the same way that grow up here, not only in Pennsylvania, but throughout Appalachia, particularly if they kind of had to grow up through those times and seeing the same things that you're talking about, as we all have done as well, and seeing the changes made to where many of those black banks are going away and they're being converted to economic development opportunities or green space or recreational trails and, fishing, kayaking, boating type opportunities in these areas. And that's something I think that we're all striving for better qualities of life for our communities in the areas that we're working in, and also for future, generations, our kids and grandkids that are going to come up and not have to maybe deal with so much of that pollution and legacy pollution that we've all had to endure growing up, that we're really happy to see, become removed from the landscape and be converted into such positive uses. And I think that Aripa and Robindale and a number of the other plants across the state have just been tremendous partners in doing that. And I think Andy's may have a chance here just to give a good example of what that partnership is like with both EPCAMR and WIPCAMR and Aripa that we've had for nearly 30 years, the partnership, but maybe in the last 20 some years in just trying to pull together a program to support some of these community efforts out there. So maybe Andy wants to talk about that a little bit.
I thank you, Bobby. I think some of the activities that Jim mentioned and his philosophy points out his dedication to the environmental issues that we all deal with today. And it's so important to point out that Jim also spent multiple years on the board of directors for WIPCAMR, serving as president for some time. And we thank him for that. That was a wonderful time. And this is probably an appropriate time to discuss, we go back to Aripa, the the Appalachian Region Independent Power Producers Association. The AMD-AML award, the annual award, to date $100,000 has been awarded to on-the-ground AMD-AML projects from Aripa. And this year in 2025, Aripa awarded another $6,000 to important projects across the coal regions of Pennsylvania, to watershed groups and conservation districts that are partnering with Aripa on projects to remediate the legacy of pre-regulation coal mining. On top of that, Robindale has become a platinum sponsor of our annual PA Abandoned Mine Reclamation Conference. I have a plug for that. That's treatminewater.com. If you haven't gone to that website, go to the website, and it's a wonderful conference. This is only scratching the surface of some of the charitable contributions from Aripa, Robindale, and you personally. Your generosity is undeniable. Tell us some of the other causes you support, either through Aripa, Robindale, or personally, if you don't mind.
Well, Robindale is, I said, it's a really a family-owned company now from Latrobe, and they are a very strong belief in supporting the communities that we do business, and we have quite a program for anybody that works for us if they're personally involved with projects, and it's very wide-ranging, and from environmental education. Any local sports teams, conservation groups, they're a very big promoter. Kind of in preparation for this, I went back and looked in 2024. Robindale contributed over $800,000 to support and it was 156 local groups, and that's everything from Boy Scouts to school programs, and kind of thanks for reminding me when I was getting ready for this. You kind of lose focus of that. It's just so many. Their outreach has been tremendous. Personally, I'm really involved with a lot of the conservation related groups. National Wild Turkey Federation is a big one for me. I had served on the state board for 23 years for that. Was a local chapter president for quite a while. Pheasants Forever, Trout Unlimited. Robindale is a business sponsor for Trout Unlimited. And then, as I mentioned, more recently in the last few years, there's the South Branch Fishing Club is a small grassroots nonprofit formed out of Nantiglow, PA. Since we're starting to see wild trout, we're doing stream improvement projects on Blacklick Creek, for which Robindale has done 2 different ones now with the Cambria County Conservation District and the Fish Commission, as we're starting to see that rebound. So
that's an amazing amount of support to give to the community, and I think we're all very proud to know Aripa and Robindale. Bobby, do you have any more questions?
No, well, no, I was just going to add to that AMD-AML, our Abandoned Mine Land Mini Grant program, that we still have some funds remaining here in the anthracite region to reopen our round for this year. And there has been an anonymous donation that also has come into both coalitions to support additional funding going out to the communities. And we're going to reopen that round, and it's available on the ARIPA website as well as EPCAMR and WIPCAMRs. If there are other interested conservation districts or community groups and partners that are looking at working on abandoned mine drainage or AML or education and outreach type programs within our region. So we've given out 2 awards this year. I think WIPCAMR may have been able to give away all of their funds to a particular project in Western PA, but we have some funds left, and we're going to be taking some applications. So you'll find some information on our website if you're interested in doing that. So take a look back at the website, and if you have an idea, submit it, and we'll take a look at it and hopefully get some funds back into the community. And as Jim had mentioned, about his work with the different conservation groups and the Trout Unlimited chapters out there in central and western Pennsylvania. Next year, I mean, we're not through our conference this year, but I know next year we're going to be working on hopefully a joint effort with the Pennsylvania State Council of Trout Unlimited as a part of our overall conference in 2026. So that'll be an interesting partnership that we're looking forward to doing next year. So, I mean, Jim, do you have anything kind of a plan for Robindale right now, or RIPA coming up here in the fall, leading into the winter, or you're just hoping for the cold weather so that we can, get more of the waste coal into the plants?
We've just started an AMLR project in Indiana County. It's the 5th AMLR project we've done with BAMR, economic mine land, economic revitalization. So we have finished this 2 piles. We have 2 piles. No, we finished 3 piles now. We just finished one in Clearfield County. We have one in progress in Blair County, and this one we've just started in Indiana. And it's a great program. It's addressing a pile that we've been discussing reclamation with the watershed groups in BAMR since 2005. So 20 years in the making to try to find the funding necessary to do that work. So, and then Robindale's owners have continued. We spent tens of millions of dollars in reinvesting in these power plants, reopening them, setting them up for long-term maintenance cycles with turbines and all the reliability of the plant. So, we're expecting at least 20 years of run in front of us to keep doing this. There's a lot of refuse piles out there still. The little bit of the problem is we're eating these from the middle out, this donut, as we get further away. So what's important for us is, a big help for us is the waste coal tax credit in Pennsylvania that provides a tax credit for every ton of waste coal that gets cleaned up. Uh, it's a benefit for us as we start to move further and further on the trucking. Our freight cost goes up, so our operating cost goes up. And frankly, the last few years, the power price, despite what you see on your home bill, what the power generators get paid has not gone up and kept pace with the inflation. So that's been a real lifeline for us, and we hope that continues. We think that long term, as the demand for electricity for data centers and AI and all this demand grows, with a lot of the coal plants being retired and not a lot of new generation going on, we're hopeful that the power price for us will continue to go up, and we think we have a long future. We're setting it up for a 20-year, and we'll hopefully be in this reclamation business for a while.
Thank you. And Bobby,
Yeah, that's great.
I have a
That's great.
question. I have a question.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about economics, Jim Panaro and I, not too long ago, were referring to EconoSalt economics report. Can you give us an update on some reports that have been released or will be released, if you don't mind?
Sure. It's eConsult. It was an economics report. It was done for RIPA. I think the initial one was 2016, and then it's just been recently redone. And on the economic side, one thing that it points out is that this industry, the waste coal industry, it contributes $615 million per year to the Pennsylvania economy, and it supports at least 3,000 jobs. Along with doing that, it's providing about $37 million in annual environmental and public benefits, on top of the $267 million in annual avoided costs to the Commonwealth, that if the Commonwealth had to pay for this remediation that's done by industry. So, and while much of the benefits of the plants that we've talked about so far is done on the water side by eliminating these sources of AMD, there was another study done for RIPA by Lehigh University, where it shows that a lot of these refuse piles, our local old term for it was red dog, as these piles spontaneously combusted. When they're burning in place, they're emitting all kinds of toxic gases, sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, in an uncontrolled fashion. And anybody that's driven by some of these old piles, you can literally smell that sulfur smell in the air around these piles. So the Lehigh study shows that using this as a fuel in a controlled manner, using limestone for SO2 capture, using ammonia for NOx capture, and also burning at that lower temperature, it's a very low emitter for both NOx and mercury. So it shows that burning them is actually controlling the emissions better than letting them sit for generations. So I think both of those studies are available. There's links on the RIPA website to get all the details of those.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bobby, go ahead.
Yeah, so we would like to just kind of close each episode with a piece of advice to our kind of leaders and community volunteers, to offer to our nonprofit watershed groups and community organizations with respect to their organizational capacity and their sustainability. And do you have any kind of words of wisdom to share, or that could help them continue to keep up the good fight? It's just something we're constantly trying to support these volunteer groups on the ground that want to work with plants like yours and companies like yours to be able to do the outreach and to get the data that we need for the streams, and to kind of increase the community's awareness of the good work that you're doing. What would you what kind of advice would you say or have for those to do that in Pennsylvania?
Well, probably the biggest thing, and it was involvement with Whipcammer long ago, and working with Andy and his group. I think sometimes the coal mining, we have a strong history in PA, and that history was major contributor that allowed the U.S. to become world economic leader. 1800s with the steel industry, the world wars, and the economic boom that followed. But that legacy, frankly, left. There's a dark side of that caused a lot of these environmental and social problems that we're dealing with a century later. So what I see sometimes is there's kind of a distrust of big coal. Some of the nonprofits and watershed groups, they try to paint the current coal companies with that same brush. But there's a lot of regulation now after 1977, and it's even getting harder and harder on the water side with TMDL limits and that. And I think that's a real shame. I think some of the greatest environmental cleanups that we've seen in our state are actually being done by these same coal companies. And in my opinion, some of the watershed groups should consider partnering with the business, to support their cleanup efforts, rather than trying to fight them on every project. So, I can say without a doubt that Robindale has done more environmental remediation than any public or private group in PA, and like I said, we have 20 more years of the same. So, you need to stay involved. I think this waste coal is such a niche thing for Western PA and your anthracite region there, a very small region, that you need to stay involved politically too, supporting the waste coal tax credits and those kind of things, because, quite bluntly, people in Philadelphia don't know what a waste coal pile is. They don't know what a gob or a column pile is. They're not associated with it. So, we've got to be diligent on that side. And the other thing, the last thing I'll add is to build and lean on those partnerships with like-minded groups and organizations, like WIPCAMR and EPCAMR. Robindale's had a lot of partners to make our work successful. The Cambria, Indiana, Westmoreland Conservation Districts, the Cambria Rec Authority. But we have a very good partnership with BAMR on these AMLR projects that are just tremendous results. Fish Commission, Game Commission, so many of the local watershed groups, I can't even name them all, in working with Trout Unlimited and watershed groups. And you really need to lean on that network for support. Probably the projects you're looking to do, somebody's already done something like it. You don't need to start from scratch.
Exactly. Bobby, do you have any questions from our listeners out there? I don't know if there's any particular questions.
I haven't seen any questions other than one of our good volunteers out here in the anthracite, Chris O'Rourke. He's been on a number of cleanup efforts with us on a lot of these coal piles, and he participated in one we did just last fall where we took out 1,910 tires from one of our watersheds along an area that we cleaned up here in the Sugar Notch Run area. Probably our largest tire pile cleanup that was done within 4 hours with 35 volunteers. And he was one of them that got pretty dirty. And well, let him go that he's an Eagles fan, with being I'm a Cowboys fan here. But he's a very good volunteer that comes out whenever we need him. So I'm glad he joined us.
I saw another comment from Joe Simons that thanks Jim Panaro for his dedication to environmental causes. So that's one thing we want to make sure that people hear about that. So if there are no questions, I'm just going to say thanks again so much, Jim, for joining us today and all the work you've done for the coal impacted communities of Pennsylvania throughout the years. Thanks again for the annual RIP Award. We're looking forward to this spring's round. So if any of the watershed groups that are out there, keep in touch with WIPCAMR and EPCAMR, and we'll let you know if/when the RIP Award will be coming back to your neighborhood again. And we thank Robindale and ARIPA for platinum sponsorship of the PA Abandoned Mine Reclamation Conference. Remember, treatminewater.com. Go to that website. We're also thankful to have you as a friend and a good partner in Abandoned Mine Reclamation, Jim. We're also thankful for all of our watershed groups and all of our listeners that keep doing the good fight out there. So keep up with us. Keep up with everything that's going on. And please tune in on the very first Friday of every month at noon for a new episode of Abandoned Mine Reclamation Chronicles. And in the future, we have some interesting guests lined up. Next month, Friday, October 3rd at 12 noon, we have an interview with PADEP Secretary Jessica Shirley. So until then, everyone have a great month, and we'll see you next time. Thank you all. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks for letting me tell the story. We love it.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate you being here.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye.